There is a calculation being made right now in quiet government offices and university geology departments. A risk assessment for a catastrophe so large it feels theoretical, and if their math is wrong, over 100,000 people will have less than an hour to outrun a wall of wet concrete moving at highway speed. The mountain is Mount Rainier. At 14,410 feet, it is the icon of the Pacific Northwest, a postcard of serene, glacial beauty. But that is the first mistake. The deadliest eruption in modern American history belongs to Mount St. Helens in 1980, which killed 57 people. The all-time record goes to Hawaii's Kilauea, which killed more than 80 in 1790. By those metrics, Rainier is a quiet giant. But here is what the official reports tell you, in the driest possible language. Mount Rainier is not the deadliest volcano in America's past. It is the most dangerous volcano in its future. And the thing that will kill you has already started moving. The threat isn't fire, it isn't ash. It is the mountain itself, silently dissolving from the inside out. So the real question is, how do you evacuate a city that was built on top of the last disaster when the only warning you have is the sound of a siren telling you the next one is already on its way? Most people think of a volcano in simple terms: an explosion of fire, a column of ash, rivers of glowing lava, a dramatic, violent, and very loud event. This is how Mount St. Helens announced its intentions on May 18, 1980. It is how Kilauea has reshaped the Hawaiian landscape for centuries. Mount Rainier is not that kind of threat. The danger here is quieter, colder, and far more insidious. It is a phenomenon called a lahar. The word is Indonesian. It means, roughly, volcanic mudflow. But the term mudflow is a dangerously misleading understatement. A lahar is not mud. It is a slurry of rock, glacial ice, soil, and volcanic debris that has the consistency of wet concrete and the kinetic energy of a freight train. It does not flow around obstacles. It removes them. Buildings, bridges, forests, anything in its path is either crushed or simply incorporated into the moving mass. And it moves fast. On the steep upper slopes of Rainier, a major lahar can reach speeds of 40 to 50 miles per hour. As it descends into the flatter river valleys below, it slows, but it also spreads, a thick, unstoppable tide of gray cement that can be hundreds of feet deep. Anything caught in it is not washed away. It is entombed. The material hardens almost as soon as it stops moving, trapping victims in a solid casing of rock and sediment. This is the primary threat from Mount Rainier, not a hypothetical eruption decades from now. A very real physical process that is happening constantly, in slow motion, inside the mountain's core. The United States Geological Survey has mapped these potential lahar paths with chilling precision. They are not theoretical models. They are the exact same channels carved out by past disasters, and entire cities sit directly inside them. Orting, Washington, Sumner, Puyallup, parts of the major port city of Tacoma. The USGS estimates at least 80,000 residents live in the immediate inundation zones. Pierce County's own emergency management plans push that number higher to over 150,000 people when you account for the schools, the businesses, the commuters who drive into the kill zone every single day. They are living and working on borrowed time in the shadow of a mountain that holds more glacial ice than all the other Cascade volcanoes combined. 25 major glaciers, roughly 35 square miles of frozen water just sitting at the summit waiting for a trigger. But here is the most unsettling part. The trigger doesn't have to be an eruption. The mountain doesn't need to explode to release a catastrophic lahar. It just has to fall apart. And it is already falling apart. The most dangerous weapon in Mount Rainier's arsenal is its own weakness. For thousands of years, the volcano's internal plumbing system has been working against itself. Hot, acidic groundwater circulates through the rock, a process geologists call hydrothermal alteration. It is, in effect, a form of natural acid rain cooking the mountain from the inside. This process systematically rots the strong volcanic andesite and dacite, breaking it down into weak, slippery clay. One USG scientist described the result with terrifying clarity. The process turns solid rock into the consistency of soggy crackers. The structural integrity of the entire volcanic cone is being compromised year after year by its own internal heat and chemistry. Rainier is dissolving its own foundations. This is not a theory. It is a geological fact, proven by the mountain's own history. About 500 years ago, sometime around 1500 AD, a massive chunk of Rainier's west flank collapsed. The failure was enormous, releasing a torrent of rock, clay, and water that roared down the Puyallup River Valley. Geologists call it the electron mudflow. It traveled over 30 miles, burying the valley floor under a thick layer of debris, reaching the exact location where the town of Ording stands today. And the geologic record is clear on one critical point. The electron mudflow occurred without any accompanying eruption. There was no magma, no explosion. Just a quiet mountain on what might have been a perfectly normal day. And then, gravity won. A piece of the hydrothermally weakened cone simply gave way, triggering a catastrophe that reshaped the landscape for miles. A sunny day disaster. This is the scenario that keeps scientists at the Cascades Volcano Observatory awake at night. The possibility of a spontaneous collapse triggered by nothing more than a localized earthquake or heavy rainfall. Or simply the mountain's own internal decay reaching a tipping point. The mountain is not sleeping. It is restless. Between July 8th and mid-July of 2025, Mount Rainier experienced the largest earthquake swarm ever recorded at the site. Over 1,350 tiny quakes shivered through the volcano's core. The USGS was quick to confirm this was not caused by rising magma. It was caused by the circulation of those same hydrothermal fluids, the very water that is rotting the mountain's bones. It was the sound of the plumbing system at work. Then, just 2 weeks ago, on July 3rd and July 7th of 2026, debris flows were detected rushing down Tahoma Creek on the mountain's flank. Again, the USGS confirmed, not an eruption. These were glacial outburst floods, minor events where meltwater trapped within the South Tahoma Glacier suddenly broke free. Small-scale previews of what happens when the mountain's massive reservoir of ice and water gets mobilized. The mountain is constantly reminding us that it is an active, dynamic system. The 2025 swarm, the 2026 floods. They are symptoms of the instability brewing deep inside a weakened structure, piled high with 5 times more snow and ice than all its neighbors in the Cascade Range. An eruption would be devastating. A collapse could be just as bad. And one requires a lot less warning than the other. To understand the true scale of the threat, you have to look deeper into the past. Much deeper. The flat, fertile valleys, where communities like Puyallup and Ording thrive, were not always there. 5,600 years ago, this landscape was radically different. Then came the Osceola mudflow. This was not just a lahar, it was a mountain-altering event. A massive section of Mount Rainier's summit and northeast slope collapsed, creating a horseshoe-shaped crater more than a mile wide. The volume of the collapse is almost impossible to comprehend. It unleashed 3.8 cubic kilometers of rock, ice, and mud. That is enough material to fill nearly 1,600 modern football stadiums to the brim. The Osceola mudflow was a force of geologic violence. It surged down the White River Valley, scouring it down to bedrock, before spreading out across the Puget Sound lowland. It was so enormous that it didn't just flood the landscape, it created new land. The flow buried existing underwater embayments of the Puget Sound, pushing the coastline outward. The very ground on which the port of Tacoma, one of the largest shipping terminals in North America, is built exists because of this single, ancient catastrophe. The cities of the Puget lowland are not just near a hazard zone, they are built on top of the ghost of the last mega disaster. The deep, rich soil that makes the valley an agricultural hub is the finely ground rock deposited by that ancient mudflow. The flat topography that makes for easy development is the direct result of the Osceola lahar leveling everything in its path. People are living, quite literally, on the evidence of the crime scene. And the mountain is capable of doing it again. The electron mudflow, 500 years ago, was smaller than Osceola, but it proved the principle of collapse without eruption. It followed the same path. It buried the same valleys. The geologic story is unambiguous. The mountain fails, the lahars run down the river valleys. It has happened again and again and again for millennia. Carolyn Dreger, a scientist emerita from the USGS who spent much of her career, from 1995 to 2022, raising public awareness of this threat, helped design the curriculum that is now taught in schools across the region. She understood that for people to survive, they had to first understand that the beautiful mountain on the horizon was also a clear and present danger, a danger that did not need to glow red to be deadly. The knowledge of this history, this deep, violent past, is what turned a geological curiosity into a massive public safety emergency. It led to the creation of the world's most advanced lahar detection network, a system of machines and sirens built for one purpose: to buy time. And time is the one thing they will not have enough of. The problem is speed. A lahar moving at 40 miles per hour down the Puyallup River Valley gives you an incredibly small window to react. For the town of Ording, which sits entirely within the kill zone, the estimated warning time is about 40 minutes. 40 minutes from the moment the disaster begins on the mountain to the moment it arrives at your front door. For communities further down the valley like Puyallup and Sumner, the window extends, maybe 2 to 3 hours. But in a modern, densely populated suburban landscape, what can you actually do in 40 minutes? The immediate answer for most people is get in the car. That would be a fatal mistake. Emergency planners know that the moment a mass evacuation is ordered, the roads will become parking lots. Instant, total gridlock. The evacuation routes themselves, the bridges and highways, are directly in the path of the lahar. They would be among the first things to be destroyed. You cannot drive your way out of this. You have to run. This is the cold, hard reality that led to the creation of the Mount Rainier Volcano Lahar Warning System in 1998. It is not a system designed to predict an eruption. It is designed to detect a lahar that is already moving. Deep in the river valleys, buried in concrete bunkers, are specialized sensors called acoustic flow monitors, or AFMs. These are not seismometers. They are essentially electronic ears. They are calibrated to listen for a very specific sound, the low-frequency rumble of a lahar in motion, the grinding of millions of tons of rock, boulders, and trees moving as a single mass generates a unique acoustic signature. The AFMs are designed to hear that signature and ignore everything else: earthquakes, helicopters, normal river flow. When multiple AFMs detect that specific rumble, they automatically trigger an alert that goes to the Pierce County Emergency Operations Center. And from there, the sirens go off, 42 of them. All hazard alert broadcast sirens, standing on tall poles across the Puyallup and Nisqually valleys, ready to blast a warning that can be heard for miles. When that siren sounds, you do not pack. You do not look for your pets. You go, on foot. Uphill, this is not a drill. Except, sometimes, it is. On April 23rd, 2026, the East Pierce Interlocal Coalition Emergency Management Team executed a massive regional lahar evacuation drill. Students and staff from over 50 schools and facilities across the Puyallup, Sumner-Bonnie Lake, and Ording school districts participated. They heard the sirens. And then they started walking uphill, following designated evacuation routes, practicing the very act of outrunning a theoretical wall of concrete, children learning to run for their lives from a mountain they can see from their classroom window. This is the wager: that the technology will work, that the sirens will be heard, that people will react instantly and correctly, that a 40-minute head start is enough for tens of thousands of people to get to high ground on foot. It is a system built on a terrifyingly small margin of error, a system that has never been tested by a real, full-scale event. And while the schools practice running, the mountain keeps drawing people closer. In April of 2026, Mount Rainier National Park officially dropped its timed entry reservation system that had been in place for the previous 2 seasons. The system, designed to manage crowds, had caused massive gate delays. Now, access is unrestricted. More tourists, more hikers, more cars driving into the base of the most dangerous volcano in the country, many of them with no idea that the greatest danger is not an eruption, but the ground beneath their feet. The sheer scale of the risk is why Mount Rainier is in a class of its own. It is one of just 16 volcanoes worldwide designated as a decade volcano. This was a list initiated by the United Nations in the 1990s to identify volcanoes worthy of intense study precisely because of their history of large, destructive events and their proximity to dense populations. Rainier made the list for one simple reason: the consequences of an event are unacceptably high. The Seattle-Tacoma metropolitan area, home to over 3 million people, sits directly in its shadow. While a lahar might not reach Seattle, the cascading effects would be catastrophic. The Port of Tacoma, a vital economic artery for the entire country, could be wiped off the map. Major transportation corridors, pipelines, power grids, all would be severed. The economic damage would be measured in the hundreds of billions. The human cost is incalculable. This is what separates Rainier from a threat like the Yellowstone supervolcano. A Yellowstone eruption would be a global, civilization-altering event, but the probability of it happening in our lifetime is extraordinarily low. Mount Rainier presents a different kind of risk. A large lahar is not a low-probability event. Geologically speaking, it is an inevitability. The mountain has produced them consistently for its entire lifespan, and millions of people now live where the last ones came to rest. Seth Moran, the current scientist in charge at the USGS Cascades Volcano Observatory, is one of the experts tasked with interpreting the mountain's constant stream of data. His work involves listening to the deep acoustics of the volcano, analyzing the swarms of tiny earthquakes, trying to distinguish the normal groans of an active system from the prelude to something worse. In a 2024 presentation, he highlighted the crucial lesson of the electron mudflow. All of the lahars that have come down into the Puget lowlands in the last 6,000 years have started with an eruption, except for the most recent one around 1500. The most recent lahar, known as the electron mudflow, appears to have started with a landslide. That one exception changes everything. It means the monitoring for magma movement, for swelling ground, for all the classic precursors to an eruption might not be enough. The first sign of disaster could be the disaster itself. A sudden, catastrophic collapse with no warning beyond the rumble picked up by the AFMs in the valley below. The system is a paradox. The sirens and drills create a sense of preparedness, a feeling that the problem is managed, but they also normalize a level of risk that would be considered insane anywhere else. Entire communities have accepted that they live with a 40-minute death clock hanging over their heads. The infrastructure of survival is impressive. The science is cutting edge, but neither can stop a mountain from falling down. The warning system is the solution. The 40-minute window is the brutal complication, and the clock is still running. So what does the future hold? The cities in the valley continue to grow. Real estate prices climb. New housing developments are approved in areas that are squarely on the geological map of past destruction. The mountain, serene and white on the horizon, becomes background noise. A beautiful, static image. It is not static. The 2025 earthquake swarm was the largest non-magmatic swarm ever recorded there. The plumbing is active. The 2026 glacial outbursts were a reminder of the immense volume of water waiting to be released. The rock inside is still rotting. The fundamental conditions that produce the electron mudflow and the Osceola mudflow have not changed. If anything, they have been amplified. Climate change is accelerating the melting of Rainier's glaciers, potentially destabilizing the slopes even further and adding more meltwater into the already active hydrothermal system. The sirens, the evacuation drills, the acoustic monitors, they are all a desperate high-tech gamble, a wager that human ingenuity can outrun geology. That 40 minutes is enough. It is the same kind of gamble Las Vegas made when it drilled a tunnel to the bottom of a dying lake. A bet that engineering can solve a problem that nature created. Was the city buying survival, or just buying time? The uncomfortable truth is that for the people living in the Puyallup River Valley, there is no permanent solution. You cannot build a wall high enough to stop a major lahar. You cannot reinforce a mountain that is decaying from its core. All you can do is listen for the warning, and run faster than the people next to you. The deadliest volcano in America is not the one that makes the most noise. It is the one that has lulled millions of people into a false sense of security, all while its foundations slowly turn to clay. The threat isn't a future eruption. It's the simple, unforgiving physics of ice, water, and rotten rock. And the next time the mountain shrugs, the only thing standing between a city and its erasure will be the sound of a siren and a 40-minute head start.